The desert moon of Varix 4 was not a place for comfort. The air was dry, the sand was sharp, and the nights were colder than death itself. Ethan Cole, a human security officer, had been posted here for just 3 days, and already he hated every second of it. That night, the alien commander, a tall reptilian soldier named Karvik, called Ethan into his office. The room was dim, lit only by a blue lamp that hummed softly. Karvik's eyes were narrow, his voice heavy. "You will guard her tonight, human," Karvik said. "She is dangerous, more dangerous than you can imagine. Do not remove her chains, do not speak to her, and do not under any circumstance fall asleep near her." Ethan frowned. Dangerous. What did she do? Karvik's lip curled, showing sharp teeth. "She destroyed one of our squads in under a minute," he growled. "She killed them with her bare hands. And yet, she never spoke a word in her defense." No more explanations, no details. Only that same cold warning. Ethan had been in war before. He had seen killers, but something about this felt off. When Ethan entered the holding cell, he expected a monster instead. He found a young alien woman sitting on the cold floor, her wrists bound in glowing shackles. Her skin was pale silver, her hair long and dark, her eyes an unnatural shade, a violet that almost seemed to glow. She wasn't snarling, she wasn't threatening, she was trembling, her head lifted when she saw him for a moment. They just stared at each other. She looked more tired than dangerous, more broken than deadly. Ethan placed a metal cup of water on the floor, sliding it toward her. She didn't touch it. "You think I'll poison you? Huh?" he asked softly. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I think. You are the first to offer me water in days." Something inside him shifted. Was this really the so-called killer everyone feared? Outside, a storm was building. The wind screamed against the metal walls of the outpost, and the commander ordered all non-essential areas locked down. Ethan had no choice. The main guard cells would lose power in the storm. If he didn't move her, she would freeze before morning. Karvik's last warning echoed in his head. Do not sleep near her. Still, Ethan unlocked her from the cell. The glowing shackles still around her wrists, she followed silently, her steps slow but graceful. He brought her into his small guard quarters, a single bed, a chair, and a metal heater buzzing in the corner. "You stay on the floor," Ethan said, pointing to a blanket in the corner. She nodded without argument. No tricks, no sudden moves. Hours passed. Ethan sat in the chair, rifle across his lap, watching her as she curled up on the thin blanket. The storm outside roared, but inside there was only the faint sound of her breathing. She didn't try to escape. She didn't lunge at him. She simply closed her eyes and drifted into sleep. Peaceful, almost childlike. Ethan couldn't understand it. Everyone had painted her as a cold-blooded killer. But the woman sleeping just a few feet away looked like she hadn't known peace in years. Near midnight, the heater flickered and dimmed. Ethan got up to check it. When he turned back, her eyes were open. Glowing faintly in the dark, she was watching him, not with malice, but with something else. Curiosity. "You're not afraid of me," she whispered, her voice carrying over the howl of the wind. Ethan shrugged. "I've seen monsters before," he said. "And you're not one of them?" Her lips trembled, as if she wanted to speak more. But instead, she closed her eyes again. For the rest of the night, she didn't move. And Ethan sat awake, rifle in hand, trying to decide which was more dangerous, believing the others, or believing her. By morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight bled through the small window, casting a soft glow across her face. She was still asleep, breathing slow and steady. Karvik arrived at the door, his eyes scanning the room. "You survived," he said flatly. Ethan just looked at him and replied, "She didn't try to hurt me." Not once. Karvik's expression darkened. "Keep your distance, human," he warned. "She is more dangerous than you can ever understand. But as Ethan glanced back at her sleeping form, something inside him told him the opposite, that the most dangerous thing about her was how much he was starting to believe in her innocence. Morning on Varix 4 was never warm. The sunlight was pale and cold. Barely touching the endless stretches of sand, Ethan stood outside the guard quarters, sipping bitter ration coffee while Lyra, the so-called dangerous prisoner, remained inside. Still chained, still silent, the night's image kept replaying in his head. Her sleeping so peacefully beside him, her calm breathing. Like she wasn't the savage killer they made her out to be. Karvik had already left with a squad for patrol duty, but before going, he had thrown Ethan one last warning. Don't let her trick you. She has fooled others before. They didn't live long enough to regret it. The words carried weight, but they clashed against everything Ethan had seen so far. When he stepped back inside, Lyra was awake. Sitting with her knees drawn to her chest, her violet eyes flickered to him briefly before looking away. Ethan placed a small plate of nutrient bars on the table and pushed it toward her. You should eat, he said. She hesitated, then took one, biting into it slowly. After long silence, she asked, "Why are you being kind to me?" Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "'Cause you don't look like the person they say you are." Her lips curved into something between a bitter smile and a frown. "They say I killed 12 soldiers," she said, her voice low. "They say I tore them apart without mercy." Ethan stayed quiet, waiting, her gaze turned distant. "That part is true. But it wasn't like they tell it," she said. "It wasn't murder. It was survival." Ethan could feel the tension in the air. He knew soldiers didn't talk about survival unless the truth was ugly. "Then tell me what happened," he said softly. She shook her head. "No one wants to hear the truth. The truth doesn't matter to them. Only the story they can use." He studied her face, the small scar across her cheek, the faint bruises along her jaw, if she had been this feared warrior. Why did she look more like a hunted fugitive than a victor? The door to the quarters hissed open, and an alien soldier named Varix stepped in, his scaled face twisting in disgust at the sight of her. "You're wasting your time, human," Varix sneered. "She is poison." She was part of the Chrysin uprising. You even know what that means? Ethan ignored him, but Lyra's head lifted sharply, her eyes flashing at the name. Varric laughed. "Oh, I forgot. You can't even say your people's name without guilt, can you?" "Out," Ethan said flatly, his voice low but firm. Tia glared at him but left, muttering something about foolish humans under his breath. When the door closed, Ethan turned to Lyra. The Chrysin uprising. Was that where it happened? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood, the chains rattling faintly, and walked toward the small window, looking out at the desert. "They came for us in the night," she began. "My people were unarmed. Farmers, healers, children. They wanted the land, so they called us rebels. They sent soldiers. I was one of the only trained fighters left." Her voice trembled slightly. "They killed without warning, burned homes. I fought, not to win, but so the others could escape." Ethan felt a slow burn of anger building inside him. Those 12 soldiers. They weren't men. They weren't heroes, she said, her eyes meeting his. They were executioners. The room went silent, the only sound the distant howl of wind. For the first time, Ethan felt the pieces shifting. It wasn't a story of a killer. It was a story of someone who had been turned into a villain for refusing to die quietly. But still, there was something she wasn't saying. "Why didn't you explain this to the authorities?" he asked, her expression turned hollow. "Because the man who ordered it is the one who controls the courts." Hours later, as Ethan escorted her back to the cell for routine security inspection, something unusual happened. Passing through the mess hall, a group of alien soldiers went silent. Glaring at her with pure hatred, one muttered, "Monster." Before Ethan could react, a metal cup was thrown. It hit the wall near Lyra's head. Splashing water down her hair, she didn't flinch. She just kept walking. Her chains clinking softly against the floor. To Ethan, her silence spoke louder than any defense she could have given that night. Ethan found himself staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Her words replayed in his mind. They wanted the land, so they called us rebels. But the question gnawed at him. If she had no reason to lie to him, why would everyone else lie about her? And if she truly was innocent, then who had the power to turn an entire military against her? Outside, the wind picked up again. Inside, Lyra lay in the same spot on the floor. Eyes closed, her breathing slow. She wasn't dangerous now, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was coming, and it wasn't from her. The morning after Lyra's confession, Ethan woke to find the base unusually busy. Alien soldiers moved with tense urgency, voices low, orders sharp. Through the narrow window of his quarters, he saw a convoy of armored transports lined up outside, their engines rumbling in the cold desert air when Ethan stepped into the hallway. Commander Karvik was already waiting for him. His expression, hard change of orders, Karvik said. The prisoner is being transferred to a high-security facility off-world. You will escort her to the transport bay. The decision is final. Ethan's stomach tightened. Why now? He asked. Karvik's eyes narrowed. She's become a political problem. Best to keep her where fewer eyes can see her. Ethan could hear what wasn't being said. They wanted her somewhere far away, where no one would question what happened to her next. When he entered the holding cell, Lyra was sitting cross-legged on the floor. She didn't look surprised. As if she already knew. They're moving you, Ethan said. Unlocking her from the wall, but keeping the glowing shackles on her wrists. Her gaze met his, calm but unreadable. They won't take me to a prison, she said quietly. They'll take me to the Black Veil. No one comes back from there. Ethan frowned. I've heard the name, he admitted. But Lyra shook her head. You've only heard the stories they let you hear. The convoy rolled out across the barren dunes, dust kicking into the air as the transports moved in formation. Ethan sat opposite Lyra in the armored interior. Two alien guards flanking her on either side. He kept his rifle across his lap, but he found his attention drifting to her hands. They were scarred deep, old marks, the kind that didn't come from battle, but from chains worn too long. Halfway across the wasteland, the cum crackled to life. A voice came through, strained. An urgent convoy leader. We've got movement on the scanners, multiple signatures, closing fast. The driver cursed under his breath. Karvik's voice boomed over the cum. Stay tight. Don't break formation. Ethan's instincts screamed. He had been in enough combat zones to know what was coming. The first explosion hit the lead transport, flipping it into the air with a deafening boom. Sand and metal rained down. The shockwave shook their own vehicle, sending it skidding sideways before Ethan could even regain balance. Black shapes emerged from the dunes, raiders, fast and heavily armed, riding hovering skiffs. Blaster fire lit the air in burning streaks, striking the convoy from all sides. One guard raised his weapon and fell instantly as a shot tore through his chest. The other panicked, fumbling with his rifle. Ethan dropped low, grabbing his sidearm and moving to cover Lyra. In the chaos, the rear door of the transport blew open. Sand whipping inside, two raiders leaped in, their weapons raised. Ethan barely managed to fire, dropping one, but the other aimed straight at him. What happened next froze Ethan's thoughts. Lyra moved, shackles and all, stepping in front of him. The shot struck her in the side, sending her sprawling against him. Her expression didn't show fear, only determination. Ethan caught her before she fell. Why the hell would you do that? He demanded. Her voice was strained but steady, because they weren't here for you. They were here for me. Outside, the convoy was falling apart. Ethan knew they had seconds before the raiders swarmed them. Grabbing Lyra, he pushed them both out the blasted door, dropping into the shifting sand below. Blaster bolts hissed past them as they scrambled toward the wreckage of a downed transport for cover. She was bleeding, not badly, but enough to weaken her. Ethan tore a strip from his undershirt, pressing it to the wound. "You'll live," he muttered. She smirked faintly. "You sound disappointed." "Not even close," he replied. "Now tell me, why would raiders risk attacking a military convoy in broad daylight just for you?" Her eyes softened, though she was clearly in pain. "Because the people who control this planet aren't the only ones who want me dead. They stayed hidden until the sounds of battle faded into the distance." When Ethan finally peeked over the wreckage, the convoy was gone, either destroyed or taken. No sign of Karvik, no backup, no transport. They were alone in the wastelands, miles from the base. The twin suns were starting to lower, shadows stretching long across the sand. Ethan knew they couldn't survive the night out here without shelter, but Lyra's next words hit him harder than the danger itself. "You saved me, human. Now you have to choose. Take me back to the people who will kill me slowly, or trust me, and we run." For the first time, Ethan realized this wasn't just about guarding a prisoner anymore. It was about deciding who to believe, the army he served, or the woman everyone feared. And deep down, he already knew which side he was starting to take. The wasteland stretched in every direction, an endless sea of golden sand and black stone. The twin suns were sinking toward the horizon, their light dimming, and the cold would come fast. Ethan knew what that meant in the desert of Varix 4. Night was as deadly as any enemy. Lyra's wound was slowing her down, but she moved without complaint. Her eyes scanned the dunes like someone who had walked this land before. Every few steps, she would glance over her shoulder. Finally, Ethan asked, "You keep looking back. You think they're still following us?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she crouched low, pressing her palm to the sand. When she lifted it, a faint vibration seemed to hum through her skin. "They're coming," she said simply, "and they're not far." Ethan looked around, but all he saw was the empty desert. "No dust trails, no engines," he said. Lyra shook her head. "They're using hunters. Living ones. They ride low and fast. You won't see them until they're close enough to kill you." That was when Ethan realized she wasn't talking about machines. Whoever was tracking them had beasts trained for the hunt. They moved faster, following the curve of a ridge that might shield them from sight. Ethan's training told him to head for higher ground to scout, but Lyra stopped him. "No, higher ground makes you a target. We need to vanish, not be seen," she said. Her voice carried an authority that made him pause for someone who was supposedly a prisoner. She sounded like a commander. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply. Ethan's breath misted in the cold. They found a narrow ravine, its jagged walls offering some shelter from the wind. Ethan pulled a small heater core from his pack, but Lyra stopped him. "No fire. No heat signal. If they have a seeker, it will find us." They sat in the shadows, listening, and then faint at first. But growing came a sound Ethan had never heard before. A deep, throaty rumble, like a growl carried on the wind. Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "They've unleashed the Vorik." Ethan checked his rifle. "What's a Vorik?" Her eyes locked with his. "A predator that hunts with sound. It feels your heartbeat in the sand." As if to prove her point, the growl came again, this time closer. Ethan glanced at her shackles. "If I take those off, can you help fight?" She hesitated, then nodded once. Ethan pulled the override key from his belt, the one Karvik had given him in case of emergencies. The shackles hissed and split apart. Falling into the sand, Lyra flexed her wrists. The faint glow of the binding marks fading. "Stay behind me," she said. But Ethan didn't. They moved side by side, slipping deeper into the ravine as the sound drew closer. Then they saw it, a massive, four-legged creature. Its hide black and ridged like stone. Its head was low to the ground, horned, its jaw lined with too many teeth. Behind it, 3 riders in black armor guided it forward with long spears. The Vorik stopped, head lifting. Ethan felt it a low vibration through the sand. The creature sensing them, Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him to stillness. "Don't move," she whispered. "Don't breathe too fast." The riders scanned the ravine with glowing visors. One spoke in a language Ethan didn't understand. The Vorik's head swung toward them. Its nostrils flaring, Ethan's finger tightened on the trigger. But Lyra's hand came down hard on his rifle, pushing it down. "Fire, and we're dead." "It will outrun any bullet," she said. Her other hand slipped into a pouch at her belt. Ethan hadn't noticed it before and pulled out a small sphere. No bigger than a coin, she pressed it into the sand at their feet. A faint shimmer rippled outward. "What was that?" Ethan whispered. "A still field," she replied. "It hides our heat and heartbeat." For a few seconds, the Vorik stepped closer, its jaws opening slightly as if tasting the air. Then, suddenly, a shout from one of the riders made it turn. They pulled the beast away, moving toward the far end of the ravine. Lyra didn't move. Until the sound of its footsteps faded, Ethan let out the breath he'd been holding. "You just saved us," he said. She gave a faint smile. "And you took off my chains. I suppose we're even." They continued through the night, guided by Lyra's strange knowledge of the land. Finally, they reached an outcropping of black rock, where a narrow cave entrance yawned open. Inside, the air was warmer, the stone walls smooth and veined with faintly glowing minerals. "This will keep us hidden for a while," she said. Ethan leaned against the wall. "Exhausted? You've done this before," he said. Lyra's gaze turned away. "I've been running for years," she admitted. "But I've never run with someone willing to stay beside me." Her words were simple, but they struck deep. Ethan didn't answer because he wasn't sure if he was staying beside her because he believed her, or because he couldn't imagine leaving her to face this alone. Outside, far across the dunes, the Vorik's growl returned. The hunt wasn't over, and Ethan knew if they were going to survive, he would have to stop thinking of her as his prisoner. She was his only ally now. The cave was quiet. Only the faint glow from the mineral veins lit the dark stone walls. Ethan sat near the entrance, keeping watch while Lyra rested deeper inside. He told himself he was only guarding her because it was his job, but he knew that wasn't true anymore. They had been running for 2 days now, hunted across the wastelands. The Vorik's distant growls had come and gone, always reminding them the hunt wasn't over. And yet, Ethan felt they were getting closer to something, somewhere in Lyra's mind. There was a destination, but she hadn't told him what it was. That morning she woke before him. Already standing near the mouth of the cave, her violet eyes were fixed on the horizon. "You're thinking about leaving," Ethan said quietly. Lyra didn't look at him. "If I leave, you live," she replied. "If I stay, they'll kill you too." Ethan pushed himself to his feet. "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly. "You saved me back at the convoy. That makes us even, but it also means I'm in this now." She turned to face him, studying him like she was weighing every word. Then, without warning, she said, "You want the truth? Fine. But once you hear it, you can't unhear it." They sat opposite each other on the cold stone floor. Her voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "The day I killed those 12 soldiers. It was supposed to be a peace meeting," she began. "The Chrysan people had agreed to lay down weapons. I was there as security for our elder council." Her hands clenched slightly. They came with gifts, food, water, and in front of everyone they opened the crates, but instead of supplies, they pulled out rifles. They shot the council before anyone could speak. Ethan's jaw tightened. "What did you do?" Lyra's eyes darkened. "I fought. I fought because they were killing children in front of me. I fought until it was over. Until there was no one left to shoot at me." She leaned back against the wall, her gaze distant. They called it an unprovoked attack. They erased every recording, silenced every witness. All that was left was their version of the story, the one where I was the monster. Ethan understood now why she had refused to explain herself back at the base. If the people framing her controlled the records, then speaking up would only dig her grave deeper. "Who ordered it?" he asked, her voice turned sharp. "General Voren. He needed a war. People were in the way." Before Ethan could respond, movement at the cave entrance caught his eye. 3 figures stepped into view, bounty hunters, armored and armed. One of them carried an electrified chain, the kind used for high-value captures. The leader, a tall, thin alien with metallic skin, smirked. "2 fugitives for the price of one," he said. "Though I only came for her." Ethan raised his rifle. "You'll have to go through me," he said. The bounty hunter's grin widened. "That can be arranged." The fight was fast and brutal. Ethan dropped one with a shot to the chest, but the other 2 moved fast, a crackling. Chains snapped around Lyra's wrists, the electricity surging through her. Forcing her to her knees, Ethan fired again, but the leader ducked behind her, using her as a shield. "Drop it, human," he ordered. Ethan froze, his finger still on the trigger. Lyra's eyes met his. No fear. Just the silent message, "Don't do it." But Ethan couldn't watch her get dragged away. He lowered the rifle. The leader slammed a stun cuff on Ethan's wrist, the energy biting into his skin. They were dragged out of the cave, the cold evening wind cutting through their clothes. Their captors moved quickly, bringing them to a small hovercraft hidden in the dunes. As they were thrown inside, Lyra leaned close to him and whispered, "They're not taking us to Voren's prison. They're taking us to Cell." Ethan's head snapped toward her. "What do you mean, Cell?" Her voice was low. "There are places in the outer sectors where prisoners vanish into the pit markets. Slavery, death games. Worse. If we get there, we don't come back." The craft moved fast across the sands, through the small view slit. Ethan could see the twin moons rising their light, silver against the endless desert. His mind raced for a plan, but the stun cuffs and the 2 guards made escape impossible. Then Lyra leaned just close enough to whisper, "There's one way out, but you won't like it." Ethan gave a short, humorless laugh. "I'm already not liking this." Her eyes locked on his. "I can get us out of these chains. But it means using something I've been hiding from you since we met." The way she said it made Ethan realize this wasn't about danger to him. It was about what he would think of her afterward, but right now, they didn't have the luxury to care about secrets. "Do it," he said. Her gaze held his for a moment longer. "Remember this choice," she replied, and then, for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of what the soldiers had feared about her. Not rage, but a power that didn't belong in human hands. By the time the hovercraft slowed near the edge of the wastelands, the bounty hunters didn't realize that their prisoners were no longer just captives. They were a storm waiting to break. The hovercraft skimmed low over the sands, its engines humming. Ethan's wrists burned from the stun cuffs, each jolt reminding him he was just one wrong move away from unconsciousness. Across from him, Lyra sat with her head lowered, her hair hiding her face. The 2 bounty hunters at the rear were relaxed, too relaxed, believing the prisoners were fully secured. The leader piloted from the front, occasionally glancing back with a smirk. They thought this job was already won. Ethan leaned closer to Lyra, whispering under his breath, "You said you could get us out of this. What's the plan? Her voice was barely audible. When I move, close your eyes. Before he could ask why, her hands twitched in the cuffs. The faintest shimmer passed over her skin, a subtle, silver glow that made the metal restraints hiss and crackle. The cuffs suddenly snapped open, the sound masked by the drone of the engines. Ethan blinked. You could do that this whole time? She didn't look at him, not without them noticing. I needed them to think I was weak. One of the guards shifted, about to glance their way. Lyra's head tilted just slightly, and then Ethan saw it. The air around her seemed to ripple, as though heat waves were rising from her skin. Her violet eyes brightened. Their glow, no longer faint, but sharp and unearthly. The guard opened his mouth to shout, but Lyra moved. Her shackles dropped fully to the floor, and in one smooth motion, she twisted, her hands striking pressure points along his neck and chest. He collapsed. Without a sound, the second guard fumbled for his weapon, but Ethan lunged forward, driving his shoulder into the man's gut. The impact sent them both crashing into the wall of the craft, the weapon clattering to the floor. The pilot shouted from the front, "What's going on back there?" Lyra was already moving, faster than Ethan had ever seen. She darted past him, her hands gripping the edge of the cockpit doorway. The pilot drew a blade, but she caught his wrist mid-swing. Twisting sharply, the blade fell. Her other hand pressed against his temple. There was a faint hum, and the man went limp. Slumping over the controls, the craft began to dip dangerously toward the dunes. Ethan stumbled forward, grabbing the pilot's seat and yanking the controls back, leveling them out. "You know how to fly this thing?" Lyra asked, sliding into the co-pilot's seat. "Not well," Ethan admitted, "but I've flown worse." They rose higher, engines straining. Ethan glanced at her hands. The faint glow was fading now, her skin returning to normal. "What was that?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "It's something my people were born with. A link between body and energy. We can disrupt machines, unlock systems, or people for a short time." Ethan let that sink in. "So the power they're scared of isn't you killing people? It's you being able to break their control over anything they lock up." "Oh." She met his gaze briefly. "That's why they call me dangerous." A sudden alert flashed on the console. Proximity warning. Ethan glanced at the rear view. A swarm of black specks was closing in from the horizon. "They've got flyers on us," he said. Lyra's hands danced over the controls. "They'll be here in minutes. This thing's not fast enough to outrun them." "Then what?" She turned to him. "Then we don't run." Her fingers tapped a sequence into the side panel, opening a hidden compartment below the controls. Inside was a small cylindrical device, pulsing faintly with blue light. Ethan stared at it. "Please tell me that's not a bomb." "It's a pulse core," she said. "Short range, one blast. It'll kill every circuit in a half-kilometer radius. Their engines, their weapons, everything, including ours. So, we drop like a rock too." She gave the faintest smile. "Not if I time it right." The black dots behind them grew larger, shaping into sleek raider craft. Blaster fire streaked past, one shot grazing their hull. Ethan gritted his teeth, holding the craft steady as Lyra crouched by the pulse core. 3, 2, 1. She slammed her palm against the activation plate. A blinding flash burst outward, invisible but for the sudden silence it left behind. Engines died, the air went still, and the horizon swayed as their craft began to drop. Ethan fought the controls. As the powerless hovercraft descended in the rear view, the raider ships were falling too, some crashing hard into the dunes, but Lyra was already moving again. Her hands pressed against the console, that strange shimmer returning to her skin. The lights flickered, then came back to life. Engines roared, just theirs. The hovercraft skimmed low over the sands, its engines humming. Ethan's wrists burned from the stun cuffs, each jolt reminding him he was just one wrong move away from unconsciousness. Across from him, Lyra sat with her head lowered, her hair hiding her face. The two bounty hunters at the rear were relaxed, too relaxed, believing the prisoners were fully secured. The leader piloted from the front, occasionally glancing back with a smirk. They thought this job was already won. Ethan leaned closer. To Lyra, whispering under his breath, "You said you could get us out of this. What's the plan?" Her voice was barely audible. "When I move, close your eyes." Before he could ask why, her hands twitched in the cuffs. The faintest shimmer passed over her skin, a subtle, silver glow that made the metal restraints hiss and crackle. The cuffs suddenly snapped open, the sound masked by the drone of the engines. Ethan blinked. "You could do that this whole time?" She didn't look at him, not without them noticing. "I needed them to think I was weak." One of the guards shifted, about to glance their way. Lyra's head tilted just slightly, and then Ethan saw it. The air around her seemed to ripple, as though heat waves were rising from her skin. Her violet eyes brightened, their glow longer faint, but sharp and unearthly. The guard opened his mouth to shout, but Lyra moved. Her shackles dropped fully to the floor, and in one smooth motion she twisted, her hands striking pressure points along his neck and chest. He collapsed. Without a sound, the second guard fumbled for his weapon, but Ethan lunged forward. Driving his shoulder into the man's gut, the impact sent them both crashing into the wall of the craft, the weapon clattering to the floor. The pilot shouted from the front, "What's going on back there?" Lyra was already moving, faster than Ethan had ever seen. She darted past him, her hands gripping the edge of the cockpit doorway. The pilot drew a blade, but she caught his wrist mid-swing. Twisting sharply, the blade fell. Her other hand pressed against his temple. There was a faint hum, and the man went limp. Slumping over the controls, the craft began to dip dangerously toward the dunes. Ethan stumbled forward, grabbing the pilot's seat and yanking the controls back, leveling them out. "You know how to fly this thing?" Lyra asked, sliding in too. The co-pilot's seat, "Not well," Ethan admitted, "but I've flown worse." They rose higher, engines straining. Ethan glanced at her hands. The faint glow was fading now, her skin returning to normal. "What was that?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. "It's something my people were born with. A link between body and energy. We can disrupt machines, unlock systems, or people for a short time." Ethan let that sink in. So the power they're scared of isn't you killing people. It's you being able to break their control over anything they lock up. She met his gaze briefly. "That's why they call me dangerous." A sudden alert flashed on the console. Proximity warning. Ethan glanced at the rear view. A swarm of black specks was closing in from the horizon. "They've got flyers on us," he said. Lyra's hands danced over the controls. "They'll be here in minutes. This thing's not fast enough to outrun them." "Then what?" She turned to him. "Then we don't run." Her fingers tapped a sequence into the side panel, opening a hidden compartment below the controls. Inside was a small cylindrical device, pulsing faintly with blue light. Ethan stared at it. "Please tell me that's not a bomb." "It's a pulse core," she said. "Short range, one blast. It'll kill every circuit in a half-kilometer radius. Their engines, their weapons, everything, including ours. So we drop like a rock, too." She gave the faintest smile. "Not if I time it right." The black dots behind them grew, larger, shaping into sleek raider craft. Blaster fire streaked past, one shot grazing their hull. Ethan gritted his teeth, holding the craft steady as Lyra crouched by the pulse core. 3, 2, 1. She slammed her palm against the activation plate. A blinding flash burst outward, invisible but for the sudden silence it left behind. Engines died, the air went still, and the horizon swayed as their craft began to drop. Ethan fought the controls. As the powerless hovercraft descended, in the rear view, the raider ships were falling too. Some crashing hard into the dunes, but Lyra was already moving again. Her hands pressed against the console, that strange shimmer returning to her skin. The lights flickered, then came back to life. Engines roared, just theirs, as the craft pulled up, skimming barely over the sand. Ethan looked at her in disbelief. You restarted it. By touch? She didn't answer, just sank back into the co-pilot's seat, breathing hard. That took more out of me than you think, she said. But now they've lost us for a while. They kept flying until the dunes gave way to rocky canyons, the walls rising high and jagged. Ethan guided the craft into a narrow passage. Shutting down the engines once they were hidden in shadow, the silence that followed was heavy. Finally, Ethan said, "You could have escaped from me the first night, couldn't you?" Lyra didn't look at him. "Yes," she said simply, "but you were the first to offer me water, the first to treat me like more than a weapon." Ethan wasn't sure what to say to that, but he knew one thing. He wasn't her guard anymore. He was her partner in survival now, whether either of them liked it or not. Outside, the sun dipped lower. Far in the distance, the Vorax growl echoed faintly through the canyons. The hunt wasn't over, but this time, Ethan felt ready for it, because Lyra wasn't chained anymore, and neither was he. The canyon swallowed the last light of the day. Shadows climbed the jagged walls, and the desert's chill began to seep into the air. Ethan and Lyra sat in the silent hovercraft, hidden deep between towering stone cliffs. Neither spoke for a long time. The quiet was a rare gift after days of running. Ethan finally broke the silence. "We can't stay here forever," he said. Lyra's violet eyes shifted to him, calm but sharp. "I know. But if we move before night falls completely, they'll find us again. For now, we wait." Night on Verax 4 came fast. The stars appeared brighter than on any human world, huge and burning against the black sky. Ethan couldn't help but glance at Lyra from time to time. Even after everything, the fighting, the escape, the power, she'd revealed she was sitting beside him now, like any other traveler stranded in the wilderness. Her head tilted slightly, eyes half closed, like she was listening to something only she could hear. "What is it?" he asked. She hesitated, then said softly, "The Vorak isn't moving anymore. Either they've called it off, or it's waiting." That didn't comfort him. They ate in silence, ration packs and recycled water. Ethan hated the taste, but Lyra didn't complain. It struck him how little she demanded. She didn't ask for comfort, didn't seek pity, she just kept going, one step at a time, and somehow, that made him want to protect her even more. Later, as the temperature dropped, Ethan noticed her shiver. "Here," he said, tossing her his blanket. She caught it, but frowned. "You'll freeze without it." "I'll manage," he replied, leaning back in his seat, but she shook her head, moving to sit closer instead. When she draped part of the blanket over him too, he didn't protest. The warmth between them was subtle, but in the cold canyon air, it felt like a shield. For a long time, they sat like that. Then Lyra spoke quietly, almost as if she was afraid of breaking the moment. "When I was captured, the first night in their prison, I thought I would never sleep again. I thought if I closed my eyes, they'd kill me in my dreams." Ethan turned his head toward her. What changed? Her gaze met his, and for a heartbeat, she didn't look like the hunted fugitive the galaxy feared. She looked like someone who had been carrying a weight far too long. "You," she said simply, "you didn't look at me like they did. You didn't see a weapon. You saw a person." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. "You are a person," he said. "That shouldn't be rare." The sound of distant engines broke the quiet, faint but growing. Ethan immediately killed the minimal power left in the hovercraft, plunging them into complete darkness. They listened to maybe 3 craft passing overhead, but not slowing. When the sound faded, Lyra exhaled slowly. They're still searching. Then we'll keep outsmarting them, Ethan said. His tone was steady, but deep down, he knew this couldn't go on forever. When the danger passed, Lyra's head leaned slightly against his shoulder. He didn't move. After everything, the warnings, the battles, the hunts, the strangest part was how natural this felt. The woman every alien soldier had called dangerous was now curled up beside him. Breathing evenly. Sleep, he said quietly. You need it more than I do? Her lips curved into the faintest smile. You still don't fear me, do you? Ethan chuckled softly, not even a little. She closed her eyes, her breathing deepening as sleep took hold for a while. Ethan just watched her, the soft rise and fall of her chest. The way the faint starlight traced along her silver skin, if anyone else saw her now, they wouldn't see a threat. They'd see what he saw, someone who had been fighting alone for too long. Hours passed. Ethan stayed awake, keeping one ear tuned to the night and one eye on the narrow canyon entrance. But nothing came. Only the quiet hum of the desert at night, a sound that felt almost peaceful. By the time dawn began to touch the sky, he realized something. This was the first night since he'd met her that they hadn't been running, fighting, or hiding in panic. They were still hunted, still marked, but in this moment, they were safe. When she stirred awake, her eyes opened slowly, meeting his. You didn't sleep, she said, her voice still soft from rest. Someone had to watch over you. He replied. Her smile was small, but it carried more warmth than any blanket. Then, I suppose, I owe you another night like this, when it's your turn to rest. Ethan laughed quietly. I'll hold you to that. They packed the hovercraft, preparing to move again. But as they climbed in, Ethan caught her looking at him in a way that felt different, not as a guard, not as an ally in survival, but as someone she trusted completely. And in that moment, he realized the galaxy could keep calling her dangerous. It didn't matter anymore, because for him, the only danger now was losing her that night in the canyon. She had slept peacefully beside him, and Ethan knew no matter where they went next, he would make sure she could sleep like that again, free from chains, free from fear, always.